Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our first team meeting of 2019. Yay.
Yay.
Very spontaneous of you. Thank you. So this morning what we're going to do is we're going to take a look back in time. This month on the 24th, back in 1999, was the official groundbreaking here at ITEC. So today is really not going to be a celebration of what ITEC has done, but what God has been doing through the people that have been here at ITEC. And we're going to hear from quite a few people all the way back from the beginning, before ITEC was ITEC, to finding this location, to what it was like, 15, 18, 20 years ago when various people came. So we're gonna do that. After that, we're gonna look at, okay, so what's been going on? What does ITEC look like today? And so it should be just a fun little reminiscence as we travel down memory lane. But ITEC would not be ITEC. You guys would not be here if God had not wanted this to be. So I think what we need to do is we need to start with prayer, thanking God for what He's doing through each and every one of you and allowing us the privilege of doing here at and through ITEC. So let's pray. Father, as we come into this place this morning, Father, what a reminder of your goodness and your grace. That you would allow this idea that the WOW had so many years ago, 24 years ago, 25 years ago. And then the individuals, the people who took that idea and ran with it. And now, even what you're doing today. Father, we give you all the praise and all the glory for what you've done in this place through these people. And we thank you for it. Lord, as we take this look back on memory lane, Father, we desire that to recognize and to just say thank you. Thank you for allowing each of us to be a part of what you're doing here at ITEC and through ITEC around the world today. We love you and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So 20 years ago, that's a long time for some of us. For some of us, not so long a time. But 20 years ago this month was the groundbreaking. So I asked my dad if he would start out, because he was here at the beginning. Gene is not here anymore, but Gene and my dad were here at the very beginning. And then we'll go to Jesse, who is here pretty much from the beginning. And then Grandma Perla. And then Ronbo, Troy, and then Steve B will wrap that section up. But let's celebrate together. Pop, will you come?
Yeah, can you give me a... Hey. I can do that by myself, but it runs the battery down pretty fast. Actually, ITEC started in 1996. That's when... Oh, I can do it without that. That's when the Waodani, we were building the first little airplane, the one that's down there at the remote building. And as we were building it, other tribal people started coming by and looking and couldn't believe there were military people there and high station people and then Waodani. And we were building this little fabric covered plane. And then one day when everybody else had left and it was just a few Waodani and myself, some Quechua Indians came in and they asked me in Spanish, are these really Waodani that are building this airplane? I said, yeah, here they are. And I introduced them and they said, okay, we want to know if you'll help us build an airplane. And I said, no, because I'm helping them. And we had talked about some of the other things that we were doing, the beginnings of ident and whatnot. And when they left, kind of downtrodden, I said, you need to find somebody else that can teach you to do the things that I'm trying to teach the Waodani to do. When they left, the Waodani came to me and they were really upset. And when the Waodani get upset, they don't mince words. And they started telling me, they say, why do you say "oh"? You say yes to us, and you say "bah." You say no to them. And I said, because look, I'm busy all the time. We're trying to figure out how to do these things. And they said, now you're thinking like a foreigner. We say, you teaching us, we'll teach everybody else, and then everybody can do these things that the Kawudi, the foreigners, always come in here and do for us, but never teach us to do. So the idea was really theirs initially, and then I came up to the States and was looking for a place that we could do it here, because I needed to get out of down there so that they could do their thing. And I thought, you know, we should be near a university and we should be out in the country so that when people came here to learn, because that was the concept initially, that they wouldn't be overwhelmed with, you know, being right next to Walmart and on busy road and whatnot. But we needed to start someplace, so finally I rented a 10 by 20 stall in a used storage place, you know, mini storage place, and I got it. I think I rented it in the spring, and so it looked really nice. I hadn't anticipated Florida with about an 8-foot, 9-foot ceiling and very little insulation in the middle of summer. But then we grew to 2 units, and then we grew to 4 units, which was really great because then we could open the doors on both sides and get a little bit of air through. Then in 1998, a friend who I'd helped in business, get a business going, sold his business, and he had a bunch of office warehouse space, and he invited us to move over there. Now it had about a 20-foot ceiling, was much cooler, and it had a little office in the middle of it that was air conditioned, and I knew we were in trouble because there was no way we could go back to a mini storage place at 110 degrees or so. Then I started looking for a property to purchase and started getting bids on a building, and I thought, you know, if we had maybe 2,000 square feet, that would be really nice. Well, I soon figured out that buying a piece of property was doable, or building a building was doable, but buying a property and buying a building, that was going to stretch things a little bit. But a man at the county in Dunellen, or in Ocala, he kept getting in touch with me, was interested in what I was doing or trying to do, and kept saying, have you looked at the Dunellen airport? Well, we wanted to be out away from city, but we didn't want to be this far out away from the city. Finally, I came out here and looked at the property, and they had a 2-acre piece of property that right here, and 2.2 acres, and I asked if we could lease it, and the county attorney said that we could lease it, and the terms that he gave me were that we could lease it for 25 years, but the county could give us a 90-day notice to move out, and they would pay us what we had spent on building the building. Well, we were going to build it ourselves, so you know that was going to be way below the commercial value. And he said, and then that decreases 4% a year. I did the math and figured out there's no way this is going to be 25 years. After 16, or at least 20 years, the county would have to pay us almost nothing and make us move out. So I decided that wasn't going to work. But then this man at Ocala suggested I get in touch with a county commissioner, and I called the county commissioner. They had just spent a bunch of money to put in the commercial, you know, road out here, and they were sure that the people would come, but nobody came. There was one hangar 2 doors down from here, and that was it. So I asked him if we could lease, and he said, what do you want? I mean, what kind of a lease do you want? I said, we want 99 years, and we'll pay 10 times what per acre what the people out at the Flowmatic are paying. And he put that to the commissioner and said, you sure you want to pay 10 times what they're paying per acre? And I said, yep. it's doable. We want this to be a good deal both ways. So we leased this property, 2.2 acres, for 99 years, starting at $285 a year. But after 15 years, it doubled, and that made it $570 a year. And then I think after 15 more years, it went to the final rental rate, which is now $1,040. No, it will be $1,040 a year, and I figured that probably we could do. Then we decided on what we would build, because now we weren't spending any money on the land, and I decided a businessman who I had met only building 4,000 square feet. He said, I think I'd add one more bay to the hangar. I said, well, that would cost $25,000. And he said, okay, the check will be in the mail tomorrow. So I went back to the county and said, you know, I made a goof. 4,000 square feet, 2 bays, let's make it 3 bays. And they said, okay, and that seemed like enough for a very, very long time, especially because Jesse and Gene Walrath and Smitty and I, that was the staff. And Smitty back then, he was a lot younger, but I think Smitty was probably about in his mid-80s, and Gene was in his early 80s. But Smitty worked here until he was 92, and Gene worked here until he was 92. And then we had this office manager who you'll hear from in a while. She's only 90. I really thought that this idea wouldn't fly, but I had made the mistake of letting somebody invite me to speak at the Church of God, which turned out to be the Worldwide Church of God, Garner Ted Armstrong. And when I found out that I was going to speak at that church, I thought, you know, I don't think this is going to work. That really was a church that was way off on a tangent. But the guy that asked me to speak said, no, haven't you heard? Garner or Ted Armstrong died, and the new leaders of the church want to get involved in missions, and they want to do it scriptural way. So I spoke there, and after the end, I saw, I don't think there was anybody without white hair. And I said, now, you know, you folks, I don't know what you're doing with your lives, but you could come out and help us. And afterwards, this one man came running up to me, and about 5 other men after him. It was Gene Walrath, and he said, I've been playing golf for 20 years. He had sold his business, duck business, and he wanted to come to Florida, and he was golfing. And he said, what can I do? So I said, well, I'll tell you what, give me a call in a week. And I didn't expect the call, but I got the call, and he said, okay, what do you want us to do? We got 5 men. And I thought, rats. Now I got to think of something for them to do. And they just kept calling me back, and I would tell Jenny, this will never work. And I'd take the file and I'd put it in the bottom drawer, and then Gene would call again, and well, look what's happened. Then 1997, Jesse was graduating, and he and Stephanie, as I remember, wanted Minkai to come up for his graduation. So Minkai came up, and we started what ended up being 10 speaking tours here in the U.S. 5 times we extended into Canada, once to Europe, and then we finally ended up going to Panama for a couple of visits with a bunch of Waodani. Then in 2000, Mark Green asked me if they could make a movie out of this story, you know, not my story, but the help. And at first I said, I think you ought to go down and visit. So we went down and visited. They asked the Waodani said no. They didn't want more foreigners to come in and tell their story. unless they would tell what the Waorani said about themselves. So I took these businessmen down, and I won't go into that, but that started a 7-year process that really heavily involved ITEC. And I just wanted to quickly have Ginny come up and show you just one of the results of End of the Spear. Can you read off some of those names? These are 13 languages from India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka that we now have the rights of distribution. And that's, I think, about 1/6 of the world's entire population.
Nepali, English,
They speak that in
Tamil, I don't know.
Tamil.
Kannada.
Canada.
Kannada, Marathi, Telugu,
Telugu,
Urdu,
Urdu,
Sinhalese,
Pakistan,
Hindi, Bengali, Gujarati,
Gujarati.
and Punjabi.
Nice.
How do you like that?
And we got the rights to lip sync it. Now, these are all lip sync into those languages, and we got the rights now to do Spanish, and so that covers another about 500 million people. That same year, Gallo and some of his friends from Ecuador came up while we were building this facility. The metal building was put up for us, but we did a lot of the construction on this building, the office. Oh, I guess we're in the hangar, aren't we? Next door here. That year, Stephanie died, and that really marked our hearts deeply. And then I took a little bit of time off, went over to the coast, and started writing The Great Omission the night that we were supposed to find out whether Al Gore or George W. Bush were going to be president. And I stayed over there for 12 days while they went back and forth and tried to decide. I was done with The Great Omission, the rough draft, before we knew who the president was going to be. And then after several years of teething pains, you all began to join, and we started IDENT, IC, IMED, iFly, iFix, iFilm, iFarm, and now maybe iCounsel. What's that going to be called?
IMED.
IMED. IMED Psychological. You see this initial portable dental operatory. We kept trying things, and it running to Home Depot every other day really got to be tiring. So Gene and I went to Home Depot up here on 200, and I told the man that we needed a bunch of parts and things, but when we get home and get back to the shop, we kept forgetting things. So I said, would you mind if we just use one of these aisles here? And he said, yeah, use this aisle. So we actually built the first one of those at Home Depot, and when we needed something, we just go down the aisle, and when we got all done, took that thing up to the front desk, and the lady said, I don't know, where's the barcode? And I said, no, it's barcodes. And she had to go all the way around and figure out what we had. Then I got a call from a man who said, you know, I saw your dental operatory. If you'd give me a chance, I think I could make that into a world-class piece of equipment. And that began 3 years to come up with the portable dental system we have now. Then IC, Jesse said, I had the idea, and Jesse said, hey, let me go to China. That's where we got to get the glasses. He went over there, and when he came back, had that little roller bag figured out with the seat and we decided to use a hand chart. And then I met a young woman at Global Missions Health Conference who came up and said, listen, what you are talking about, I just finished a workshop, training and equipping people to do, that's what I wanted to do. And I said, well, what's your background? She said, I'm a medical doctor. And she said, but I can't find anybody who wants to go and train nationals to do it. They all want to go and do it for them. And I said, You know, as far as I know, there's only one organization, and they're represented here, who wants to do exactly what you're talking about. And she said, tell me who they are, I want to go see them. And I said, you're talking to them. She was in our booth, and that was Trina. And then I fly Troy with powered parachutes. I was talking someplace and showed a video, and this young man came up and said, you know, I fly powered parachutes. I'm interested in what you're doing. And then Gallo started building and Jesse started building RV-10s. Steve B came down and with some of the rest of you and kept doing, and then Troy and now Aaron with UAVs, IFIX. You know, you guys are involved in starting IFIX. Brian came and did, and somebody else did an iFilm, just video along with, and the Nationals in Ecuador were so interested that a whole group of people asked if they could come and be part of our ident training, but learn how to do video. And then Brian joined, the only videographer in history who came by who wasn't dead set on making a, a feature film. And he stuck. How long have you been here, Brian?
7 years.
7 years. And Ron, how long have you been here? And Jesse, you've been here 21 and a half years. And Jenny's been here for 22 years. Now, folks, we're still paddling upstream. There's no question that what we're trying to do is not the popular idea. But what I've noticed is when I first started speaking about this concept in churches around the country, I would see people not only neutral, but actually hostile. I mean, people would come up and say, how dare you? God has called us. His Great Commission, no doubt, was given to white folks in North America. Said, we're supposed to go. We have all the resources. We're supposed to go, and we're supposed to do it for, and what they really were getting at is, we're supposed to go everywhere and do everything for everybody forever. But I kept reading my Bible, and that's not what Matthew 28:18 through 20 talks about. Jesus said, go and make what? Disciples. And disciples are people that we teach to carry on doing what we've been doing. On the receiving end, we still need to vet our partners to be sure that they want to be true partners and don't want us from Disney World to come and do it for them. I thank God for all of you, and I thank Him that Jenny and I still have a peripheral role to play in ITEC to equip our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world, and to accept and recruit sort of people like you to come and be a part of this experiment. I was speaking at the Global Missions Health Conference, and I was translating for Eli Catachunga from the northwest part of Brazil. And he was trying to explain the concept of, please don't send more missionaries to come and do it for us. We have a church, and we have the same call that you have. And finally, he flexed his left arm. Nice. Imagine a big muscle there. And he said, you people are strong. You have the education, you have the technology, and you have the resources. You're very strong. We can't do that. But then he raised his right arm and he said, but I can go with nothing into the jungles in Brazil, and I can be in there for months, and I can go places where you could never go. He said, I'm strong. He said, but the question isn't, are you stronger or am I stronger? The question is, how strong could we be if we would do this together? That's the concept of ITEC. My fingers don't work to turn pages very well. In conclusion, we're still a tiny organization, but I believe that we're an important example of how missions can and ought to be done. And we're a good voice, fairly loud voice, challenging the status quo in missions from the second world, us, to the third and fourth worlds in our little planet here, revolving as a speck of dust in the universe. The first world of the gospel outreach came from England, and then from the continent when England began to fade in their interest. Now those countries that were the countries that exported the gospel are the most secular place on earth. And as I would find people in foreign countries that were sending missionaries here, I would say, why are you sending missionaries to the U.S.? Now the U.S. still has more missionaries out in other countries than any other country in the world. But we also are the greatest missionary receiving country in the world. More missionaries are sent from other countries here to the U.S. And when I would ask people why, they would say, because we're worried that you're going to become the next Europe. And you can see that was 20 years ago, and look what's happening now. I'm convinced that our best strategy to avoid becoming the next Europe is not a conservative Supreme Court, nor a renewed governmental commitment to religious liberty. History has demonstrated that Christianity withers when it's popular. But I believe that God blesses nations, and I've seen it when Christ followers are determined to live lives pleasing to God. Look at England. Remember, their motto used to be, "The sun never sets," on the British Empire. And that is just a tiny little island nation. I have a passion to humbly and fervently offer His gospel, and that's what brings us together, to those who lack access to it. As a friend Jay Jackson says, I'm dreaming of the day when the news comes that the last person in the world has access to the gospel.
Well, yesterday afternoon, Jamie said that this meeting was going on, and asked if I'd say a little something. Haven't had much chance to make notes or anything like that, but the beginning of my experience with ITEC, I might have to just narrate the pictures if they have pictures. The second half of my senior year of high school, which was in '97. I was in an on-the-job training program, so the second half of the day for that semester, I was out of that self-storage unit helping build the Genesis initially. Then I went off to college, and I got married, and I think it was the spring semester of 2000. My dad wanted help, so I took, I think it was 2 or 3 days a week. So I think I took classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then came down here Tuesdays and Thursdays with Jenny, and spent the day here helping out. And then I graduated in December of 2000, and it was just before finals week, I think. I was down. We were living with my parents because Stephanie had passed away. With of course Jenny, and Joy was a baby at the time. So we were driving, and my dad said, "So why don't you come work for ITEC when you graduate?" It was about 10 days before I graduated. So I said, "Okay." I mean, I didn't have anything else planned. I had a job in Gainesville, but it was not a long-term. It wasn't a career type of thing. So December of 2000, I came and started working here full-time. And I don't remember when Gallo came, but I was, doing the accounting, doing some bookkeeping, I was involved in the dental system and the video system we had back then. Typical day was Grandma and myself here, and my dad was here from time to time when he wasn't speaking. So it was the two of us and Gene and Smitty, of course. So Grandma would heat up a can of SpaghettiOs or something like that for lunch, and then when when Grandma left, then Ron would, burn the pizza for lunch. That was a long time ago, but there was just a few of us here then. And then, of course, I was doing administration and bookkeeping and accounting and a lot of stuff in the office, and I was just burned out. And that's when Gala was here building the RV-10. I don't remember what year that was. 04? 05? I think it was 05.
Yeah.
So early in 05, I decided to just take a day away from the office and start working on the airplane. I didn't know much about aviation. I wasn't a pilot, wasn't a mechanic. I mean, I was an accountant, crying out loud. So I decided to take a day working with Gallo, and that became 2 days and 3 days and half days full time, and then that's been 15 years, 14 years
15.
now. So now of course I'm around, but I'm not doing anything I'm doing more than I'd like to in my office, but now the accounting still serves me, but I'm in aviation, training up the guys, and still helping where I can. People that weren't here back in the early days of the portable dental system and stuff like that, they every once in a while have a question that I need help with. So it's changed a lot over the years, and it's kind of exciting seeing more than just Grandma and Gene and Smitty on a typical day. Although we miss seeing Grandma.
Well, Jamie said yesterday too, Grandma, you talk for about 5 minutes tomorrow. Me? I can hardly remember my words, much less talk, but here I am. I had to write down a few things. Minnesota is my home. Do I?
Just don't hit it with your papers.
Okay.
Turn it over towards Mom. There we go.
Okay. Minnesota is my home, for better or for worse. We had a tough winter, lots of snow, lots of really cold weather, and by the time my daughter Sherry, and I left for Florida, my spring had come. My yard was clear of snow. We're going back home on Wednesday, and I hear they're going to have, 5 or 6 inches of snow that day? So we may not make it home. At any rate, like I say, it's for better or for worse. I was married at age 18. My husband, Jim Olson, and I had 6 children, 6 wonderful children, 3 girls and 3 boys. And I was a stay-at-home mom, very busy, raising kids and cooking and whatever. And then, I think it was in '75, Jim started feeling strange things, and he had a inoperable brain tumor. So he passed away after a few months at 49 years, much too young. At that time, 4 of my kids were married. Ginny had gone with a singing group to Ecuador and ran into this handsome blonde fellow and brought him back with her. Fairly soon he came to see us in a few weeks, and they were married in Ecuador. And so I have great in-laws, I'll tell you. I have Steve and Dwayne and Judy, and who else do I have?
Another
Steve B. Steve is a very good name. I have a son-in-law, Steve Saint, a son-in-law, Steve B., my own son, Steve O., And I even have a stepson, Steve Hyde. So that's 4 of us in the family. Okay, I remarried. John had custody of his 5 children, so I went back to child rearing again. The youngest was 10 years old, and they were great kids. They all accepted me. It was a very easy transition. And they still love me, and I love them too. But that's lots of kids, 11. Several years later, I went to realty school, and I became a realtor for 10 years in Wilmer, Minnesota. That was fun, and it worked out good for me. I worked until the last day, and then the day before we moved to Ocala, because John's health was kind of iffy, and he always had longed to be in a warm climate. So we came and lived near the kids here. And as soon as we had moved, Steve and Kathy decided they should quit farming and come down and work with ITEC. So we came home. I came home, and they came here. I tried real estate here, not so good. But I did find a real special plot of land with beautiful live oaks just down the road here. And the kids bought that, and that's where Steve and Jenny and Jesse and his family have now built their houses on that land. So I guess God had me here in real estate for a reason, and that was it. That's good enough, right? After that, Steve suggested ITEC for me, and I had about 7 years working here. It was baby ITEC back then. But there was a building. The building was up, and we had an office all set. Didn't have a kitchen then. We had I think a hot plate for a while, and then we got a range sitting out in the hangar. But I became, I got to be pretty important here.
That's right.
Okay. So I became part of the staff, a few good men, a one-woman front office person, chief cook and bottle washer, a one Band-Aid medical specialist, and sometimes a mediator. I wrote newsletters at times. I handled a computer with help from my boss, Jesse. If I didn't know what I was doing, I had a computer for years, but I never trained in it, so I didn't really know what I was doing. So I'd say, Jesse, can you help me? And he'd come, he'd go, 10 seconds, he was gone. So the next time it happened, I said, Jesse, can you help me? But there were good years, really good years. He always responded to my calls for help. Steve Saint believed in me. When they were living in Dallas, they decided to go with another couple, neighbor couple, to the Holy Land for I think 2 weeks maybe. And so they asked me to come and stay with the kids at that time. The poor little rascals. They were angels, really. But before they left, the day before, I think, Steve said, Mom, will you take us to the airport tomorrow? I said, you aren't serious, are you? I mean, I lived in a little town of less than 20,000 people, and no way could I drive in Dallas, nor find the way to the airport and back. I said, do you think I could do it? And he said, I know you can do it. He always believed in me, whatever situation was, and I tried to rise up to part of what he was looking for. So I did that, and it worked just fine. Had them all there with me on the way to the airport, but I had to get home by myself. John and I were married over 29 years, and he died in 2006. I hadn't planned to move back to Minnesota, but I heard that one of my grandchildren, actually the one granddaughter lived in Dallas, had said to her mother, "I think Grandma Perla should move back to Minnesota." And I thought about that, and I said, I've got 4 kids there. I just have one, the family here. When you get old, you kind of start depending on just whoever is near you. And I thought, no, that's not right. I need to go back, and so all my kids are important to me, which they always are. But so I moved back. I need some notes here. Yeah, in June of 2007, I went back. And that's when they decided, can't have Mom living so close, so they moved back here. Anyhow, my experience at ITEC was wonderful. I loved every minute of it. Great people, great cause. Often while working here, I thought, I don't know how long this will last. And there was some doubt that would come every now and then. We needed more people. We needed more funds. Miraculously, someone would come to the door, just who we needed. And miraculously, too, all the money we needed came. Didn't get begged for or anything, it came. So I thought, well, God is doing this thing. It's all from Him. And He is able. I knew so clearly that God was behind this, and He approved and was blessing it. So it's not little ITEC anymore. It's gotten way beyond my scope. Not so little anymore, but still blessed by the Lord. And by all of you, dear people. I think I've said it. It's enough.
Wow. The time has really rolled by fast. I can't believe this. But then, yeah, okay. We're going to see some pictures here. I'm sure it'll bring a few chuckles. But no change? A little bit. In 1999, I was serving my last tour with the U.S. Air Force in Australia. And when I left Australia, to be honest with you, I really didn't know what the Lord had next for me to do. We just knew that we wanted to bring my family back to Florida, to be close to Orlando, to help take care of my parents and my wife's parents. We didn't want to live in Orlando, but we thought we'll live somewhere out in this area. And so the Lord brought us to Citrus County. And when we came to Citrus County, we really didn't know anybody. We found a local church that we got involved in, and through God's providence, eventually, I ran into Jesse Saint. And Jesse and I became really good friends to the church that we attended. And one day, Jesse came up and said, "Ron, how would you like to come and work at ITEC? We could use somebody in the front office." I said, "Well, okay, I'll do that." So this was over 14 years ago that I started with ITEC. Perla was still here, and she was a very hard act to follow. I wondered how on earth could I keep up with her. She had a lot going on, and she was keeping busy. That was also the time when the End of the Spear movie and the End of the Spear book was very popular. The new generation really didn't know the story so much. So that kind of rekindled that story again to the generation now. And that time when I started, there would be people who would contact ITEC that were part of the story. So that was very exciting to be able to pick up the phone and then talk to someone that had some connection to that story. And even during that time, Steve's mother, Marge, was alive, and I had the privilege to get to meet her too. She was a very special lady. But ITEC has grown and grown and grown. As you can see here, a lot of people. There are a lot of people that have been a part of ITEC that are not here, that have moved on and gone on to other things that God has called them to do. But it's just been such a phenomenal blessing to work with so many talented and gifted people over all these years. And yes, we had fun here at ITEC. So we tried to make this place a very fun place, a very challenging place to work. But I'm just very, very thankful for the opportunities that God gave, that we can work together and serve Christ in this place. That's why we're here, to make Christ known. Besides that, there's nothing else more important that we can do. So I thank everyone, and I remember, I want to quote Proverbs 16:9. The mind of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. And again, I would have never thought that I'd have the privilege and blessing to work here at ITEC all of these years. And to think that God had brought this out. When I left Australia, I had no idea that I'd have such a great opportunity and blessing as working here. And I'm thankful to him, and I'm thankful to you all for the great privilege to work with you. Thank you.
Hi guys, I think I got about 20 minutes notice for this. So I was in St. Louis, and a friend of mine said, "Hey Troy, come with me tonight. We're going to go hear this guy. He flies those little things you fly." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, he flies those little things you fly, but he flies them in the mission field." And I'm like, "No way, really?" So he was the longtime friend, editor of Frontier Magazine at that time, worked for U.S. Center for World Missions, which I was heavily involved with at the time. So we went, Steve was speaking, and at the end of his speaking, I really didn't connect the dots too much on the story. I'd heard about it, but not too much. But he showed Tomenta flying a powered parachute in the jungles of Ecuador. So our mutual friend, which was Rory Clark, there was probably a line, I want to say dozens of people, maybe 30 people waiting for Steve to get his book signed or get the sign. So Rory walks me right up front to Steve, and Steve and I just start talking, and I could tell people in the line were getting frustrated because Steve wasn't signing books. He was talking to me about flying. And this went on and on and on and on. At the end of the night, we exchanged phone numbers. I went home and didn't think too much about it. And then a week later, I got a call. My wife Laura goes, "Troy, you have a call from Steve Saint." And I'm like, "Steve Saint?" So Steve asked me to go on a trip with him. So I think Steve and B picked me up in the RV-10 in St. Louis, and I'm like, well, this is pretty neat. We're going to go look at some projects, which I think was Laterno, or I don't know where we went that first trip. Maybe it was Newton, Kansas, look at the Maverick. We did that trip. Steve had me travel out here 1 or 2 more times to do some training. And then Troy asked me, "Troy, would you be willing just to come out here? We need somebody kind of with your skill set to organize and help me do projects." And Laura and I talked about it. We're like, no way. People in Missouri look at Florida as beaches and retired people. We never knew, there was this part of Florida. But God started working on our hearts, and we said, yes, we'll come out. And I would come out and I'm like, Lord, this guy is so full of ideas. He's just bursting at the seams with creativity. And that was my big draw. He had so much creativity in him, I thought he was just nuts. So we would come in and he would have all these ideas. And I would try to maybe take some of those ideas and start working on them. So, man, it's been a ride. It has just been a ride. One of my first trips into the jungle with Steve, you know, we flew an RV-10 from here to Guayquil, to Shelmira, and then in the jungle. And the plane kind of ended on its nose on that trip. Said I remember that we sunk in the mud. We get out, I sink in the mud probably about to my knee, and the Waodani just started laughing at us. They just thought it was the funniest thing that we'd kind of nosed the plane in and did that. But it's just been a wild, wild ride. One of my very first experiences in Ecuador, I just remember the IC program was just getting going. I think I was doing actually the first training on that, and this lady came to me. We got her. She goes, I can't see through a translator, of course, I can't see my needles anymore to knit. And she was just crying. She says, I am not useful anymore, just not useful. We put the lens ladder on her, we got her some glasses, and she just started bawling. And she goes, I can be useful now again to my community. I can see the needles, my knitting needles. And at that point I knew, okay, this is going to make a difference. This organization is creative. I'm drawn to it. God's brought me here for a reason. It's just been an incredible ride. Now I'm old and I kind of like the beaches. So it's a good fit. I can't even read my notes because now I need these things. But Steve was so full of ideas. That creativity is what I love about this place. You know, it's the vision of what could be. What are the possibilities in the kingdom that we can do that nobody else will even attempt? And that attempt might be because of danger. And we get so caught up in our lives and danger and living safely. I'm like, this place brought me because Steve would just get in anything and fly it. And I'm like, that was kind of my mojo too, which is probably a little silly. Me and Steve might have not been great for each other, but we did some things. We did some incredible things together. And I'm just so honored to be a part, at least of half of those years of ITEC. Thank you.
Well, I grew up in Minnesota also. Kathy and I were married in 1979, June of 1979. That Christmas we went down to Ecuador and spent Christmas down there with Stephen. We went with you down there to spend Christmas with Abe and Marge. And we were I was exposed to missions. I grew up in a church that was very nominal, so I didn't have any experience of missions, didn't know anything about missions, didn't know anything about the story. And we toured around Ecuador, and I saw missions firsthand. And it was an incredibly eye-opening experience. One of the places we went to was Papayacta. At that time, HCJB, some of you recognize those letters, was broadcasting shortwave all around the world. And they were building a hydro project, expanding a hydro project in the mountains of Ecuador. And I saw that they were using volunteers to do construction work. Run a backhoe, run a dozer, and I thought, that's something I can do in missions. That's kind of cool. So the next year, Kathy and I went down with Steve and Jenny, and we stayed there for 2.5 months working on that hydroelectric project, running a backhoe and running a dozer. I mean, and getting out of Minnesota winter. I mean, what could be better than that? So there's many, many stories that could be told about that. We'll fast forward to 1995. It's winter, and I get a phone call from brother-in-law Steve Saint and says, "Hey, how would you like to go down in the jungle and build an airstrip?" I said, "Sure, why not?" So we did. We went down and we started an airstrip out in the Waorani territory. So we get out there the first day, and Steve has kind of got this planned out. We get out there, and he goes, the visionary that he is, "This is the airstrip." And I look at it and I go, "All those trees?" A little different perspective on airstrip versus trees, but we started working on that airstrip. Went back again after that a number of times. Let's see, 1995 we went down and spent Christmas in the jungle. That was March when we started the airstrip, and then that Christmas we came back down with our family and spent Christmas in the jungle. And I can't remember if it was either that Christmas, and I came back down again in February with Sherry and Perla. And one of those two trips, or maybe both of them, we did our first ITEC class. I think he's got a picture.
Yeah.
So that's TD and me working on a chainsaw.
And that was our house.
And that was our house right up
That's your
there on the top.
bedroom. Yeah.
So that was winging it, to say the least, on our first ITEC training. Next few years went by. We went down to Ecuador a number of times with the WOW tours with some of our daughters at different times. Kathy came down again on one of those, right? And then in either 2000 or 2001 or 2002, we came down here because ITEC had started. Kathy and I came down here thinking maybe there's a place for us here at that time. We had 4 daughters, and the oldest one must have been a senior or just graduated, so we had a couple of teenagers, and Lori was in 5th or 6th grade. Coming down here with the thought of moving down here. Well, with 3 daughters that age with friends, it was a very quiet ride to Florida. They did not want to move to Florida in the least. We looked around, and it just wasn't a fit at that time. So we decided to go back to Minnesota. Fall of 2007, Steve and Jenny were up in Minnesota doing some speaking, and we sat down and we talked again. At that time, our youngest daughter was a junior in high school. And my brother that I was farming with was thinking about semi-retiring and turning the farm over to me, and I thought, well, yeah, that'll work. We talked some more, and we really considered, well, this might just work. But quitting farming is not as easy as it sounds. But we decided to do that. Before we decided to quit farming, I was excited about coming with the possibility. Kathy wasn't quite so sure about that one. She was leaving family and friends in a town where she had lived all her life. So I remember getting a phone call from this lady. I remember exactly where I was standing on the farm. It was the fall. We were drying corn, and I answered the phone, and she says, "I'll go with you." And I said, "Who is this?" You remember that?
I do.
And well, yeah, that was Kathy said, because I didn't want to come to Florida without her. You know, that wouldn't have been cool. So we decided to come, and some of those conversations, Perla had moved back up to Wilmer at that time, so we were talking about ITEC, you know, what's going on down there? What are they doing? And she gave me a plaque at that time, gave us a plaque, and it says, sometimes you just have to take the leap and build your wings on the way down. So we took a leap, came to Florida. But when we decided to come to Florida, I had to go tell Mom and Dad that we're moving. My dad was 96 at that time. He had driven tractor for us till he was 95 on the farm. He had farmed all his life. His dad had farmed, so my grandfather had farmed all his life. And I made the decision to stop. Wasn't going to do this, to stop farming. There was going to be no more beer farms. And that was tough. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do. So not only quitting farming, we're moving away from family and friends and Mom and Dad. So we moved here in February of 2009. And who was here? Steve, Jesse, Ron, Mark, Doc Evan Bensler was here, Gene and Troy. So there were 7, 8 of us. I had to be up to number 8. So came down here to do the IFIX program, but as Troy mentioned, that Maverick thing was in the works. So I did a couple IFIX training courses, and but when I was back here, it was busy on the Maverick, and nothing really happened with IFIX until we put the Maverick project on hold, and then we developed the IFIX manual in 2015 with Robbie's help, and so that's a little story of how we got here.
So hopefully you get a good picture about how ITEC became ITEC. As you guys know, ITEC is all about opening doors to the gospel by training and equipping indigenous Christ followers, passing them the baton so that they can be the hands and feet of Christ in their own communities. That's what we do. We do 3 things. We develop tools. A lot of you here are engineers. We train, we equip, and then we partner with like-minded organizations. It was in 2006. We had done some training trips in 2004 and 2005 to Ghana, to India. I participated with ITEC in 2005 and 2006. At a board meeting in 2006, my dad had the idea that really developing tools and training are very different mindsets that are required. If you develop tools, you have to be outside of the box, thinking like that. But if you're going to train, you need to be very systematic and inside the box. So he had the idea at a board meeting, well, what we really need is we need 2 divisions of ITEC. One to develop and one to train. Charlie Vittido, a dentist who had been on the Ghana and the couple India trips, he said, you know, I'm going to do that, but Charlie did that in Louisville, Kentucky. Over the course of time, and that was called the Empower approach. Over the course of time, there was some lack of communication there between Empower and ITEC, and so we were doing training trips primarily in Ecuador. Then when Jim and I started in 2010, a short time after that, my dad said, hey, why don't you guys plan this trip to Ecuador? So we planned this trip to Ecuador, and we were going to Ecuador with a church from Birmingham. I think that was one of the trips, the first trip that Brian was on. And after that, we were just doing Ecuador, but that church in Birmingham said, hey, we have some relationships down in Bolivia. Let's go to Bolivia. And so I think that was 2011 or 2012 when we went to Bolivia. And on the third trip to Bolivia, we had a training center in Ecuador. It really felt like God was saying, you know, it's time to kind of look at Africa. That was actually the first year that GMHC had a GMHC in Africa in Nairobi. So Marlon, one of our board members, and Trina and I went over to check this thing out and see what it was all about. And God began opening more and more doors to Africa and then to Southeast Asia, as well as through guys like Joshua Chang to continue in South America. And over the course of time, I think last year we went to, over the last 2 years, we've done about 48 or 49 countries, somewhere over 50 trainings, training 450 or so Christ followers in different parts of the world. And this year, we have trips going, we've already been to Southeast Asia, we have multiple trips. In fact, this month we're going to Africa. This month we're doing a site visit in the Middle East. And I think we have 16 or 17 different trips scheduled right now for this year around the world. You know, when people have come, as Grandma said, you know, people would just show up at the door. That's happened more and more and more. And even though quite a few people are not here today that have called and said, you know, we can't make it. If you watch the Facebook now, they're going to be showing you guys. And I mean, look at if you just look around the room and look at all the people that are involved in ITEC, even though probably 7 or more people other than our spouses are not even included here today. So this is a celebration of where God has brought us and what we're doing today. None of you are here because you get paid a huge salary. None of you are here because you were recruited to come. None of you are here because, you know, it's just a great group of people. You're here because God has called you here. And we're excited for what God has been doing, what He did, what He has been doing, and what He continues to do. None of those things are possible unless you're here and unless we stay the course on the vision. So thank you for the role. I could have had every single one of you get up here, but the grill, I think, is heating up, and we're going to celebrate as any good Christian should do with food. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just wrap this time up with a word of prayer. I'll also ask the Lord to bless the food, and then you guys can feel free. We probably have about 15 or so minutes before the food will be ready. You can just, maybe there's work in the hangar, I don't know, but otherwise, oh, I'm sorry. As soon as this is over, we need to head outside. We're going to get a team photo of everybody that's here. All right? Let's pray. Father, thank you for what you have done with people who simply were willing to be used. From 1956 to 1994 to 1999 and now to 2019. What a blessing it is to be able to be used to further your kingdom. Lord, we are willing. Everybody here is here because they are willing. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for bringing the team, those who are here, those who are not here today. Lord, as we go from this place and all over the world, Father, we don't want to be known. We want you to be known. So we ask that you would do that. Thank you for this food, for those who are preparing it and who have prepared it. Please bless it to nourish our bodies. Give us a good afternoon as we focus on serving you well today. Amen. Thanks, guys. We're going to head right outside.